This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And this week we're revisiting Battlefield 2042's weapons and checking out some of the firearms that have appeared since release.
Right, well, it had to happen. It's the future, albeit by 20 years. So we have an electromagnetic weapon.
Let us know other games or guns you'd like to see Jonathan break down in the comment section below, and if you enjoy this kind of content, let us know by liking the video. Right, over to Jonathan.
It's our old friend, the G36, specifically the C model. This is, well, by configuration, this is a G36C. Intriguingly, it's actually marked G36K, which I don't fully understand. So if anyone knows, let me know. Now, that might be a quirk of the fact that this is, in fact, as you might have noticed, this is a semi-automatic carbine or short-barreled rifle, semi-automatic only, and that is because it is a British police. It's ex-British police firearms unit, but it's the same weapon as I'm seeing on the screen here. But this is a little bit of an old-fashioned setup in terms of you have a broom handle style gangster grip on the front, maybe put your thumb forward so you can actuate the switch on the light, but it's not as sort of blended into the weapon or as high up on the barrel as you would want from a sort of more modern perspective. This is relatively modern for a museum piece, but nonetheless. And like, is it accurate? Yes, it looks pretty good to me. The graphics have reached a point now where the polymer looks, well, like polymer. In fact, it even looks worn, or shinier at least, around the pistol grip, where you, funnily enough, grip it, where it would get shiny and polished. And the magazine housing, which is replaceable, is, I mean, on ours, it's basically the same shade of black plastic. On here, there's a difference, which I think adds to the look of the 3D model, and it's perfectly plausible if you've been swapping parts around on different guns. And they're both the traditional HK paddle release. We have examples of the G36C that we've shown on the series before that are STANAG or AR-15 pattern magazine wells with a press button on the side. So all looking good. I can't see anything earth-shatteringly wrong with this. It's to the point where the screws on the carrying handle are coming in from the right side on our gun and the left side on the game model. That's the level of nerdery I'm having to stoop to find anything wrong with this thing. So all looking pretty good. In fact, it's even the same. It's so similar to ours that it has the built-in HK style front sight there. It's nice when we have stuff in the collection that's a pretty good match for what's in the game, albeit this won't fire an automatic, and I bet we're going to see a lot of automatic fire. Just want to add, actually, on the right-hand side here with different lighting from the in-game light source, or the in-gun viewer light source, that's looking really nice, the way the light's playing across the surface, and it's textured like the real polymer. There's sort of weird wear pattern around the front of the magazine well, I think that is, rather than some sort of oil or something. Whatever it is, this looks like a used, quite heavily used weapon, which is nice. Continuing in the best traditions of Battlefield with future weapons that then turn out not to be future weapons, we have the Beretta / General Dynamics / someone else who I've forgotten, sorry guys, who all went in together to produce this, the RM277 or 277, which was a rifle submission for the Next Generation Squad Weapon program. And not so long ago now, this failed, basically. This was not selected, and the US version of Sig Sauer were successful with rifle and machine gun. And we've seen versions of those in other games, or certainly of the rifle. And 6.8 is the metric designation for that cartridge. So to avoid any issues over naming, they have just gone with the metric designation, RM68. Back to the 1950s concept of a high-power, high-pressure, long-range cartridge with a lot of striking power, if I can put it that way. But they did not adopt this platform, which for me, as a connoisseur of bullpups, is a bit of a shame, because it really looks very, very spacey and cool. So it's kind of nice that it has an afterlife in this game. I noticed with the reload there that's done with the right hand. That's not correct as far as modern practice goes, and any drills I saw performed with this in limited trials footage or whatever, promotional footage that I saw, was all done. Right hand stays on the pistol grip so that you're in control at all times. That's just standard now. Even the AK is run that way. So to suddenly revert to the old 50s way of removing the mag, replacing the mag, and doing everything else with your firing hand is an odd choice. I wonder if that's been done for some visual reason that I can't put my finger on. The backup iron sights here, I suspect, are a bit redundant. They're canted off to one side, so they're not obscuring the field of view of the, I think that's some sort of Russian optic, but yeah, they're kind of redundant. Optical sights these days should be reliable enough that you don't really need permanently attached canted iron sights. But hey, that's just me. And there's that rail again with the metallic contacts on it that is supposed to power things direct. So instead of having to have a battery in the optic. I don't think that actually factors into gameplay, and it's a bit weird because every firearm manufacturer represented in the game, if this was real, would have had to mass manufacture new guns with that in there, because for the most part these rails are forged in place or machined in place on the upper receiver, and you can't just swap them out. Like in the old days, you'd get an Allen wrench out, take off the rail, slap on a different one. Of course, you can't do that, A, because it's part of the same piece of metal, and B, because it has to be wired in to some sort of battery in that upper receiver somewhere to power those devices. Okay, so in terms of the handling, the recoil, I haven't fired one of these. I'll probably never fire one of these. I can't even remember what the promotional footage seemed to depict, but we know from the extensive footage released of the SIG offering that the 6.8 cartridge is significant in terms of recoil energy. And I suspect automatic fire with this thing should be, well, I say it should be a little bit more visible in terms of recoil and dispersion on target. But then again, if the rate of fire is correct on this, it's quite a slow rate of fire. So it might be able to chug along and hold it on target like an old-fashioned BAR or something. So my knowledge and experience on this is limited. Normally a cartridge of this power level would produce more recoil, and certainly in a game where that tends to be, if anything, exaggerated. The ubiquitous Desert Eagle assails my eyes once more. That's fine, I quite like Desert Eagles, and on one level, not a practical level, but on a cool level. This looks like the modern version of the Mark 19. Mark 19 is the correct designation, which is interesting. They haven't changed that. They have changed the company name. It's on the grips, it's on the side. United Arms Incorporated, made in USA. Should of course be Magnum Research, but licensing. It looks like the lightweight version of the Mark 19, which I believe has a shorter barrel. It certainly has cutouts and a compensator. It's a modern variant of the Mark 19 Desert Eagle. They rattled through the marks very quickly on the Desert Eagle, as we've mentioned before. The only thing that's making my brain itch slightly is the shape of the trigger guard. That whole area there looks a bit off, and I can't quite put my finger on it without bringing one out to compare. We've waved enough Deagles around on this series for the time being. Yeah, overall, looks like a very satisfying Magnum pistol to use. Tactical reload or emergency reload. It's very clunky, very satisfying sound and look to them. It's got to be up there with the Deagles, generally, I think. This is a new one on me. At least I don't remember reading or hearing about this. I have therefore looked it up. So this is a German. Well, I looked up the fact that it was German, basically, and the name is correct. So I'm guessing this is a licensed real-world gun. I dare say sufficiently lesser known that you might not realize it was a real-world gun unless you looked it up. I hope so, because I had to. Bullpup configuration, obviously. Just saying what I see on that. I did pick up on the reload something that is a trope of video game guns and is going away because of motion capture of people who are skilled in the operation of firearms, but nonetheless. And it's not even so much the inserting a magazine and then slapping it. I know that's done in some places and by different people, but it's what we see here, which is the magazine gets sort of weakly slotted in and then slapped into place, which is an incredibly bad idea. So some people will say don't slap magazines in the first place, notably in the British Army. I'm reliably informed. And more importantly, if you only like put the magazine in loosely and then take your hand away at all, it's going to fall out, or has a very high chance of falling out. And your magazine falling out of the weapon is a really bad idea. Given the military context of this game, or like paramilitary, I think, with 2042, depending on which faction, it seems a bit unlikely. And it's something that we are, I think, moving away from. So I'm not sure how Germany is, the Germans are going to feel about a very American gun, the Kel-Tec P50, being attributed to them, because this says on the side, Gunther Firearms Pistol 5.7 by 28 millimeters, which is correct for the type, made in Germany. I think there might, I don't think they'll be wild about that. That's not to disparage Kel-Tec. They're a very innovative, interesting company who do some really unusual stuff, and this is one of those things. So if you don't know this, and I've been waiting for this to appear in a video game ever since I saw it emerge, you split the whole gun in half. It pivots at the front, and the magazine is a P90 magazine upside down, and it's feeding up into the breech, and the barrel is in that upper part of the gun. It has that trademark rectangular texturing on the grip that's on basically all the Kel-Tecs that I can think of, and a very sci-fi blocky shape to it. It's worth pointing out, and I'd be surprised if Kel-Tec didn't have an experimental automatic version of the P50. The P50 that's actually available for sale is a semi-automatic pistol. It's not actually marketed for military or law enforcement use. It's a civilian pistol with a relatively large capacity and an unusual mechanism and an relatively unusual cartridge. Yeah, I don't know if how well a Select Fire version would function, and the market for it is probably nil. But I'd like to see it if one does exist. Of course, in the game, they couldn't resist making it automatic. Now, another gun that I had to look up. There are a number of modernized 37mm less lethal launchers on the market. If they're modernized, they've usually got rails on them so that you can attach at least an optical sight, some sort of grip, that kind of thing. So I didn't know what this one was. Apparently it's the EXD37 Extreme Duty, and I'm sure it's a very good less lethal launcher. What it can't do is shoot 2 rounds before reloading, because it's a single-barreled, single-shot launcher. So I'm perplexed at the game insisting that a visibly single round out of a single barrel can fire twice. You have to imagine that's some sort of balance issue in testing. They discovered that people absolutely hated it, and they needed to up the round count by 1, and either didn't have time or inclination to come up with a multi-shot launcher. Of course, the problem there is there probably isn't a 2-shot launcher. All the ones I can think of are single shot, or they are 3 rounds in a tube maybe, or they are rotary with 6 rounds, say tear gas or baton rounds or something. They obviously liked the look of this. They wanted a limited capacity grenade launcher, so they're calling it an explosive launcher. It isn't. I'm not aware of any 37mm loads that are lethal, or intended to be lethal. That's kind of the whole point, is that they shouldn't be interchangeable with 40mm launchers, which are primarily lethal. Really weird fudge. A single shot launcher that's designed to only fire 1 shot and be less than lethal and not be capable of deliberate killing people. And then the game has turned it into an explosive launcher that also fires 2 shots magically somehow. And it's unusual for this game to make such an obvious, I won't say mistake, because it's clearly been done deliberately for some reason. Now this looks quite a bit like the XM25, which was a thing in Battlefield games before, and a thing in real life briefly, until it was sort of binned. I could be wrong, but this does not appear to be an XM25. It has a different designation, XM370A, and the design, I haven't had a profile view of this, but the design appears to be significantly different. The rail covers on the side at the front would immediately mark this out as, at the very least, an improved or different variant of the XM25. It has a flat top with a rail system on it, which the XM25 never had, as far as I remember. It had a sort of integrated electro-optical sight that sat on top. It's critical to how it works with the sensor-fused munitions. Functionality of the said sensor-fused munitions is there, no more so than in prior incarnations where you aim where you want it to airburst and then you fire. And I seem to remember I quite enjoyed the original XM25 in Battlefield. This looks a bit frustrating because multiple explosions going off around the enemy here and it's taking like 3 to 4 rounds to kill them. Now, it's not hitting dead on a lot of the time, but that's kind of the point of a grenade launcher, is that the fragmentation is supposed to do the job. So it doesn't look as powerful as I would expect it to be. However, the XM25, I don't believe, was as powerful as they expected it to be, partly why it disappeared rather than being refined and improved and fixed. Those very small diameter grenades seem to not pack enough fragmentation and blast to actually do the job of a 40mm round. Now, another very uncommon, certainly outside of Russia, firearm here. Very briefly familiar with this, having discovered that it existed only recently. So this is what's called in the real world the RPL-20. Look at the trigger frame on this. You should see it's the same grip, integrated trigger guard, what looks like a magazine release catch, but is actually a release catch for the trap in the base of the pistol grip. That's from the current iteration of the AK-12. This is a new Russian light machine gun design that I believe is still experimental. It looks quite different. It almost has the look of a more Western weapon with a lot of, I guess, aluminium forgings, extrusions, machinings, not sure which. A sort of monolithic receiver there. And still, if this is accurate, and I've no reason to disbelieve that, still firing the 7.62x54 rimmed round and still using non-disintegrating links, because you have to with that round, because it has a rim. You can't have a mechanism that drives the round through the belt and has the belt disintegrate. You have to stick with the old-fashioned non-disintegrating belt. So you could see this as a potential replacement for the PKM and the Peschenig. It does appear to be quite a radically different design, and I need to learn more about it, doing what I do. Not a remarkable in-game light machine gun, except for the fact that we have cartridge cases spitting out the left side. Long-time viewers will know is a recurring subject in this series. It has a whole history going back to Counter-Strike and how the view was mirrored, and then certain games making the aesthetic choice to have, because the gun is on the right side of the screen, to have the cases coming across the field of view. In this case, and this might be the only time this ever happened, the RPL-20 actually does feed from the right and eject from the left. You can see the big dust cover over the ejection ports, and in the preview you could see the big metal steel starter tab on the end of the belt on the left side, meaning that you're pulling the belt across into the action from the right to the left, and when you fire it, cartridge cases are flying out of that port on the left. So it couldn't be a better light machine gun for Battlefield. It's a brand new design that no one's using yet, well, that I have seen, and ejects cases from the left. So it's Battlefield all over, and if we were still maintaining the classic East versus West team setup, then it would be perfect for that as well. That's not quite the case in 2042, but nonetheless. Right, well, it had to happen. It's the future, albeit by 20 years. So we have an electromagnetic weapon. It's written on the side, Sabo Rail, which is on the magazine, so clearly indicating the type of ammunition. The fictional name Nordvik, and a design that looks a little bit like a cross between a bullpup and a power drill. Sorry to the designer, it is a really cool design. It just makes my brain think power drill with that big power supply hanging off the bottom of the gun. We can't say much practically about rail or coil guns. I assume this is a rail gun rather than a coil gun. I'm not sure that we're going to get to find out, but we'll see. Coil guns are just a series of electromagnetic coils accelerating the projectile through them. A railgun is two parallel rails. They do much the same thing in a different configuration. And the idea that by 2042 we will have handheld rail or coil guns is absurd. That's just not going to happen. So I have to say, cool design, if a bit Deus Ex Human Revolution for a Battlefield game. Kind of disappointing in how it actually functions, because it really just seems to be a glorified, I guess, well, low capacity, relatively high damage assault rifle seems to be how it's done, or well, no, more of a DMR. So 20 round capacity, you know, reasonably powerful semi-automatic function, but with the ability to go automatic, quite controllably, interestingly. No reciprocating mass, and just the projectile going down range. We might expect reduced recoil, depending on the mass of the projectile, of course. The big old battery pack on the bottom doesn't get swapped out. Power doesn't seem to be a concern. Personally, I'd like to see, like, let's say, high accuracy, high damage, ability to shoot through multiple enemies, with the downside of low projectile count and having to swap out the battery every now and again as well. To me, that would justify better having this supposedly primitive portable railgun in the game, or a massive backpack power supply and something that looks a bit more prototypical than this, which really does look like it's from 100 years in the future or more, not 20. And the scope's really weird as well. I don't quite understand what's going on with the scope. Those were the guns of, well, should I say, more guns of Battlefield 2042. I've still yet to play this game. Maybe it's time to actually have a go. Thank you for watching. As always, we appreciate it, both at GameSpot and here at the Royal Armouries, where I'm sitting now. Come and visit us if you can. If you can't, check out our various social media platforms. And we also have our own YouTube channel as well. Thanks, guys. See you next time.